Shalom to my brothers and sisters out there. I will having a conversation with one of the brothers and about a situation we want to come back and try to touch base with, but I want to get this off before we get started. And this is namely to a lot of our brothers and sisters that will have a desire out there to be teaching or sharing the information or shed light on the situation. I adjure you that you would do things according to the scripture. And so when it comes to relating your information, the most important people that you're going to relate your information to is the ones that the Most High instructed you to relate it to. And then from there, anybody else that comes in contact with it and benefits from it, it's an added plus. But in all actuality, the only people that you are responsible for is if every child of the Most High walk by the instruction that the Most High give them, the whole body would be fulfilled. And one of the things that he said, you teach the next generation, you instruct them. And then the Father gives us families. He gives us wives and he gives us children. And those are the ones that we are to be responsible for. And so when we start chasing after the scripture and try to get understanding and wisdom, it is not for the sake of us to be able to run out into the world and then give everybody some instruction, but it is for the sake of them that have been placed in our care, namely the next generation. Okay? And so, book said father leaves the inheritance to his children's children. And these are my children's children. I just wanted to drop that out there. But one of the things that I want to take a look at right now is the games that's been played out here. And one of the great tricks that being played is that people in this day and time are trying to make it seem like prophecies have already been fulfilled when they haven't, as a means to thwart the Father's people's purpose. And so we're gonna air that out there right now. And another thing is that we're still caught up and hung up on terminologies. So I hope that you write these scriptures down so that when you come up against these type of fights, you can be able to, with clarity and with knowing where the scriptures are, to be able to refute what's coming against you. Now we'll deal with this word Egypt, okay? We'll deal with Egypt, because when you show people Deuteronomy 28 and 68, where it said, I'm going to bring you into Egypt again with ships and bondage, they always think that you're talking about a land mass. Okay, but the reality is that Egypt was not a land mass. It was not a country. It was not a nation. It was a terminology used to describe something. Okay. The landmass was called Mizraim. All right? Now, it would be no different if I used the terminology and said, well, I'm about to go home to the old lady. Well, it don't literally mean that the old lady, that my wife is the old lady. It is a terminology that is used as a description of describing. Or if I say, oh man, I'm about to go to the crib, it don't mean that I'm about to go and jump in a baby's crib. It is a terminology that is used to say that I'm about to go to the house. And so the crib is a terminology that is used to describe the circumstances of the house. The crib is where I lay down. It's where I chill at. All right? Or I'm going to work. Man, I got to go into this hellhole again. It don't literally mean that my job is a hellhole, but it's a description of the circumstances of my job. All right? And as it is with Egypt, okay? And so when we're looking at this false so-called prophecies being fulfilled, it is crazy, all right? So we start here. We go all the way back to the beginning. We see the Father told him, Abraham, get thee from thy father's house into a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a father of many nations, okay? Many nations. Okay, you got to understand that he had Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob, Jacob had 12 sons, and each one of those tribes became a great nation. And so he said, I will make you a father of great nations, that in thee all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay, so Abraham became the father of many nations because of their purpose, according to Exodus 19, verse 5 and 6. And you shall be a kingdom of priests to me. The many nations that was born out of the loins of Abraham were born so that they could be scattered out into the world and become priests to all of the sons and daughters of Adam that knew the Father not. All right? We know that those prophecies had been fulfilled. Okay? But now when Israel fell, he said, I'm going to bring thee into Egypt again with ship. And some people try to confuse and say, well, they went back into Egypt. Well, according to the scriptures in the book of Exodus, how could they go back into Egypt when that particular place, or Mizraim, was completely decimated? Through plagues, all of the livestock and everything that they could sustain themselves was literally destroyed and wiped out. And then when Moses told them, today see the salvation of the Lord, after the day you'll see these Egyptians that you see, you won't see them no more. And then his whole Pharaoh and his whole army was recorded as drowning in the Red Sea. So if that meant a literal, or Egypt being a landmass, what would they have to go back to, and who would be responsible for taking them back? You see, it's impossible. Okay, so here's some scripture for you. Isaiah 48 and 10. Egypt is a description of the circumstances of Mizraim. Egypt, the iron furnace of affliction, the furnace of affliction. Exodus 20, verse 2. I brought you out of Egypt, the house of bondage. Deuteronomy 5 and 6. I brought you out of Egypt, the house of bondage. Micah 6 and 4. I brought you out of Egypt, the house of bondage. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2. I brought you out of Egypt, the iron furnace. And so anytime you see the word Egypt recorded in the scriptures, it always tell you what Egypt meant and why it was called Egypt. It was a description of the circumstance. It was not a landmass that they went back into. So when we see Deuteronomy 28 and 68, and he said, I'm going to bring you back into the iron furnace. Egypt, the iron furnace. Egypt, the house of bondage. Egypt, the furnace of affliction. He is simply saying, I'm going to bring you back up under those same circumstances that you were under when you were in the landmass of Mizraim. All right? And so some people try to thwart that and say prophecies was fulfilled. They went back into Egypt over there. Well, wasn't no Egypt for them to go back over there because it didn't know Egypt exist. Only the circumstances of Mizraim is where the word Egypt comes from. And as I said once before, if I say I'm about to go into this hellhole and I'm talking about going to work, it don't mean that my job is a literal hellhole. It means that the word I attach to it, hellhole, gives you an ideal of the circumstances that I have to deal with when I go to work. All right? Now, let's deal with the prophecy. In thee all the families of the earth shall be blessed, because the 12 tribes of Israel were the many nations that the Father promised Abraham for the purpose of blessing the other sons and daughters of Adam. And even being sent back into bondage was part of the Father's plan. Okay, because in order to be a kingdom of priests, you have to be scattered into every culture of society. And so even through our failure, the Father's still working his purpose. Even though he punished us by going into slavery, he said, you didn't do what I told you to do willingly, so I'm going to force you to do what I told you to do by picking you up, placing you in every place that you should have just obediently been willing to go in and operate in. And so the nations will come to know the Father according to Isaiah 14 and 1. The stranger that is among shall join himself to the house of Jacob. Well, how he gonna join himself to the house of Jacob except Jacob is scattered all over the world? And as for the Jews, God never established, he never named the people Jew. He never established a Jewish nation. He established the nation of Israel. And there was a difference between an Israelite and a Jew. A Jew is a man-made thing. It is a modern term for a modern people. An Israelite is the people that was born and birthed into existence based on the promise that the Father had made Abraham. And so you got all kind of nonsense out here. And so the question was asked, well, I know that the Jerusalem, New Jerusalem is in the future, but could that be spiritual? It is impossible for New Jerusalem to be spiritual, because it is impossible for you to be spiritual Israel. According to Jeremiah 31st chapter, verse 35 through 37, it said, "Thus said the Lord, that giveth the sun for a light by day, and the moon and the stars for a light by night. If these ordinances shall pass away from me, then I will cause the seed of Israel to cease from being a nation before me." Is the sun still giving light by day? Is the moon and the stars still coming out at night? Then okay, then Israel still exists in the earth as a nation of people. All right? And see, the Father ain't regathered Israel. And so you can turn on the History Channel and the Discovery Channel and all of this and look at those documentaries dealing with these people that call themselves Jews. Okay? If their main purpose was to be a kingdom of priests in the earth, who are they being a kingdom of priests to? Okay? You see, because they don't allow nobody outside of their particular nation to come in. Neither are they going out trying to bring nobody in. So they are wiped out right there off the bat. And it's all falsehood, trying to get you to think that prophecy done been fulfilled. Okay, well, another prophecy say that, okay, when Israel is back in the land, that there shall be peace. Is it peace over there? Have everybody done away with their weapons? Have they beat their weapons into plowshares and they swords into pruning hooks? No. Well, see, that's false. Okay? Yeah, that's false. So all that spiritual Israel stuff, and that's a lot of stuff that the Christian church use. You understand what I'm saying? Out of ignorance. Oh, well, the church is the spiritual Israel now. How you going to be the spiritual Israel? There ain't no spiritual Israel. Because during 1,000-year reign of the Messiah, there will be land. There will be a kingdom set up on earth for the Father's people. Now, if it was going to be something spiritual, yeah, right, whatever. Let's look at this then. Let's look at the scripture in Micah. Okay? First, we're going to look at Malachi chapter 3, verse 6. "I am the Lord thy God, I change not. Therefore, you sons of Jacob are not consumed." You see, even though the Father sent us into all these different places, we cannot be consumed. He said, you're not going to be able to be destroyed, because I'm not going to change my mind about the promise that I made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because of that promise, nobody will be able to consume you or stop you from carrying out the purpose that I established for you in the beginning. All right? Now, when we want to see where Israel is, since people try to trick you with false prophecy like God done regathered the land, let's skip over until the book of Micah, 5th chapter, dealing with around the 7th verse, where it says, "And Jacob and the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples, and the remnant of Jacob shall dwell among the Gentiles, as a lion among the beasts of the field." All right? See, he let you know exactly during the last days where the remnant of Jacob is going to be. Okay? So if you want to say, well, okay, you can't show nowhere through history where no Jew was ever excommunicated from the land of Israel. Oh yeah, you can see where they were imported, but you cannot see where they were exported. And these are the things that they try to trick you with. Well, God's regathering his people according to his promise and this and that. Well, what happened to the original purpose that the Father had given his people, that they should be a kingdom of priests? Okay? Ain't no Jew never been sold into every nation on the planet. We are everywhere. We're in every Arab country on the planet. We're in all of the African nations. We're in the Britons, in Europe, the Americas, in all of the islands, in Brazil. We are everywhere because of the purpose that the Father had bestowed on us. And so the Christ came along and said, when this gospel is preached in all the earth, then the end shall come. Okay, well, when you look at TV and satellite and this and that and the other, and you look at all the things that the Christian churches have set up, man, they have reached everybody on the planet with what they call the gospel, yet there is no end. You know why? Because what they call the gospel really ain't the gospel at all. Here is the gospel. Psalms 147 number, verse 19 and 20. He showed his word unto Jacob, his statutes unto Israel. As for the other nations, he have not dealt with no other nation. As for the other nations, they have not known anything concerning his judgments. So if the other nations never knew nothing about the Father's judgments and he never showed them his word, how could they be presenting the world with a gospel that was true? He only showed it to one group of people. And out of their rebellion through slavery, he had to sprinkle them into every nation on the planet so that they could become and fulfill the purpose that he originally established for them in the beginning, that they would be a light before the Gentiles, and that no man would be able to destroy them, and that there would come a time, according to scripture, that they all would bow down and say, surely this be the people of the Most High. So, you know, you got the scriptures, you got the word of God, but you got to have it in its right context, in its right form. And there is nobody on the planet that had a capacity to deliver the Father's word in its true form except the Israelite. Except the Israelite. And he don't need no seminary school, and he don't need to go to no college, and he don't need all these extra books. You know why? Because the Spirit is in him. He said, you ain't got to go to heaven. Deuteronomy 30 and 15. You ain't got to go to heaven and say, who going to bring it back so we can do it? You ain't got to go to the far ends of the earth and say, who going to bring it back so that we can do it? He said, the word is near you. It is in your mouth. It is even in your heart. I put it there because it was the purpose to which you were born. But you got to get the truth in its right form. And it is impossible to deceive the Father's people because we was born to do this. Born to know the book because it was written about and for me and for my children and for my children's children for the sake of the rest of the world. So whosoever will, let them come. And that's why Paul was explaining to them, you know what, just because Israel fell, do you think they're not going to get back up? He said they fought and made way for you to be grafted in, okay? You can be grafted in, but there ain't but one way for you to be grafted in. You must receive what's being offered from the Israelite, from the one that the Father gave it to. When you skip over to John, 4th chapter, dealing with the woman, he said, you worship what you know not. We worship what we know. For God took salvation and committed it to the care of the Israelites. He said, unless you get it from me, you don't have it.